So something that has been a bit of a struggle for me lately is patience. As you can imagine, with 3 little kids and a new job, and we're going to be moving to a new house and stuff, sometimes the patience runs thin a little bit. So what I decided to do is try to look at patience and from a biblical perspective on how to improve your patience, why should we have patience, and really what patience is to begin with. And growing up is a little bit of a different experience because I had 2 very different examples. You know, my mom is the epitome of patience. She's great with little ones, and she's just a very patient person in general. She can take her time. My dad has a tendency not to be so patient, as you might know him. But only in certain circumstances. Most of the time, especially with people, he's a very patient person. But I would say that he's more patient than most. But there's certain times and certain instances where we would get into where his patience would run thin. And when that happened, it was all downhill from there, just like anybody else. But one place in particular where patience wore thin a lot of times was at restaurants. And I'm sure everybody has had the same experience. When you're at a restaurant and you're hungry and you just want to eat or you just want something to drink, your patience can wear pretty thin. And when I was little, I remember from the youngest age I remember, there were 6 of us. So when the waitress came around, you better know what you're going to drink, and you better know what you're going to eat, and you better go as quickly as you can around the table. So my dad would start, he would take Coke, and then my mom Diet Coke, and then, it went on down the road. So it was like an auction. Coke, Diet Coke, sweet tea, water, butter. So, and if you missed your beat, you kind of got skipped. Oh, he doesn't get anything. So you learned that you had to go quick, and that came to bite me later on because I got used to just saying Coke or Diet Coke, when a waitress wanted to ask me what I wanted to drink. And the first time I was on a date with my wife now, Ashley, the waitress came around, I didn't even look up, I just said Coke, and she looked at me and years later on said, that was the rudest thing I've ever seen in my life. Because she was a waitress, and there's a please and a thank you aspect of it, something that I've definitely worked on. But it got to the point too where he would drink Pepsi, especially when I was younger, Pepsi. He would always order a Pepsi, and it would get to the point where he'd say, just bring a pitcher. You're not going to come back quick enough, so just bring a pitcher. And then it finally got to the realm now where he just goes and he fills it himself. So if you ever been out with my dad, he'll get up, if he runs out of drink, instead of waving down somebody, he just goes into the kitchen, into the back, come back and sit down and drink it. Yeah, well, sometimes they're just not quick enough, and when he's thirsty, just don't get in his way. Is the main rule. But at first, when I was growing up, it was pretty easy to have patience because my mom was a good example, and then my dad, whenever I saw him in those circumstances, I'd say, well, I should tone it down because I know what that looks like a little bit. But lately, I've started, my wife has been saying more and more, oh no, the Casey's coming out. And it's usually only in certain circumstances, just like my dad, when you're tired, or you're hungry, or you just don't want to be in that certain circumstance. But recently, I was at Legoland, and it was the middle of summer, and I was pretty tired, it was pretty hot, and we were waiting in line for the ride, and it was not moving fast enough. They had this station, so they had a line, and then they had another, after you get through that line, you go into this queue, and then after you're in the queue, you get onto the ride. Well, there are 3 people working, but none of them were really working, and it was only a 90-second ride, and it was taking 5 minutes to load up that 90-second ride, and I was way far back in the line. And this lady, she just was taking her time, getting everybody onto the ride. So I decided to get out of my back position, walk to the front, open the gate, and say, come on through, and get into the line. And the lady came up to me and said, do you work here? And I was in the moment, being a smart aleck, I said, only part-time. And she said, well, you can't do that. And I said, well, I've been through the training, so I'm technically allowed to. And if I had said that, I'm pretty sure I probably would have got kicked out the party because there's certain rules that you should do it. And And so, recently I've seen in myself, a need for more patience. So really that begs the question, why should we have patience? And what is the point of patience, and how can we develop more? But really, why should we have patience? It boils down to the fact that we should have patience because God has patience with us. And that's your first little sermon note. We should have patience with everyone because God has patience with us. He has infinite amounts of patience with me. And I know He has infinite amounts of patience with everybody here in this room. And there's a story in the Bible. It's in Matthew chapter 18, verses 26. It's actually a parable that Jesus tells. And it's after Peter asks him, well, how many times should we forgive somebody? 7 times? And he says, no, not 7 times. 7 times, 77 times. And along that line, meaning as many as, just keep forgiving, have patience with everyone. And in Matthew chapter 18, the parable reads, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wants to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man owed him 10,000 talents, which in terms of money is around $1 million. So this guy owed the king a lot of money. And so a servant was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, a few dollars. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servants fell to his knees and begged, be patient with me, and I will pay it back. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. When the master called the servant in, he said, you wicked servant, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how your heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or your sister from your heart. So this is a reflection, a parable of what Jesus does with us. See, we owe him everything. We owe him millions of dollars, as he says in here. There's no way we could ever pay back the debt we owe. We are all sinners. We are owed debt. And instead, he gives us mercy and patience and said, even though you owe me all this, I'm going to forgive that. And then what we do sometimes is we're the fellow servant. After being forgiven, after having shown patience, we go around and we turn around and don't give that same patience and forgiveness to others. And what Jesus is saying here is, no. If you really want mercy, if you really want forgiveness, then you have to show that to everybody else. So that's kind of why we should have patience. It's an example of it. There's an old story of General Patton back in the war, and there was a soldier that had committed a crime, and General Patton came forward and he was visually shaking, and he said, don't worry, son, all you get here is justice. And the soldier said, I don't need